Barron gets into one of the best universities in the US, but faces prejudice. Someone appears on campus who decides to publicly humiliate him, Emma Brooks, a vocal liberal activist. She challenges him to a debate, confident that she can easily defeat his arguments. Want to know how this fight ended? Stay tuned, subscribe, and like to stay up to date with news stories. Barron Trump is used to attention. He grew up with cameras flashing, saw his name in newspaper headlines as a child, and knew he would always be treated differently. But if as a child he simply observed it, now, having entered one of the most prestigious universities in the United States, he felt the full force of other people's prejudices. From his first day on campus, Barron realized that people here were divided into two camps. Some respected him for his intelligence, his restraint, and his analytical mind. These students and professors judged him not by his last name, but by his actual knowledge. They saw him not just as the son of a former president, but as a man who strove for knowledge and sought to prove his independence. But there was another category. People who thought that he was here only because of his father, that everything had always come easy to him. These students talked about him behind his back, tried to catch his every move, hoping to see even the slightest mistake. They could not imagine that he could have entered here honestly, that he was truly talented in such difficult disciplines as political science, social studies, and mathematics. Barron knew it. He saw the sidelong glances, heard the hushed conversations, felt the tense silences as he walked into the classroom. But he wasn't here to prove anything to anyone. He wasn't here to argue, he was here to learn. He was especially respected by his professors. Despite his background, they noted his discipline, ability to think logically, and ability to present strong arguments in discussions. One of his professors, Dr. Richards, a political science professor, often used his answers as model ones, which further irritated his detractors. But even among the faculty, there were those who were wary of him. Some professors with progressive views did not miss the opportunity to lightly taunt him in discussions, even if not overtly. They saw him not just as a student, but as a symbol of an era they did not support. But it was the student debates that attracted the most attention. It was a university tradition that every month students could challenge each other or even professors to intellectual duels. The topics could range from economics to social issues, but the debates on politics were especially interesting. This was where Barron could shine, and where his detractors waited for the moment to embarrass him. He didn't care. He wasn't looking for conflict, but if he was called, he would be ready. And he knew that day would come sooner or later. Barron loved debating. It wasn't just an intellectual game, but a chance to test yourself, to encounter different points of view, and to learn how to argue your case under pressure. He knew that there are no accidental victories in debates. The winner is not the one with the loudest voice or the sharpest sarcasm, but the one who can think coolly, clearly, and confidently. The university held debates once a month, and it was one of the most anticipated events among students and teachers. On the day of the debate, the large hall was filled to capacity, people took their seats in advance, and heated discussions took place in the corridors. Who would go on stage, what topic would be chosen, whether someone would be able to surpass the favorites. Barron had participated in several debates before that day, and each time his performances made an impression. He did not strive for popularity, but his ability to keep his cool and respond to provocations commanded respect. Even his detractors admitted that debating with him was not an easy task. But among all his opponents there was one student who particularly disliked him. Her name was Emma Brooks. She was one of the most vocal students on campus, always taking part in debates, writing for the school newspaper, and making no secret of her political views. She criticized capitalism, advocated for progressive reforms, and was always scathing about Donald Trump. To her, Barron wasn't just a student, he was the living embodiment of the system she hated. She had long wanted to defeat him publicly. When the debate was announced, Emma didn't hesitate. She was the first to apply, and in the desired opponent column she wrote one name: Barron Trump. The news spread across campus in an instant. Students wrote on social media that this would be the most spectacular confrontation of the month. Some bet on Emma, claiming that she was sharp-tongued and could tear her opponent's arguments to shreds. Others believed in Barron, believing that his composure and logic would not allow him to lose. He himself learned about the challenge when one of his friends approached him. "Do you already know?" he asked with a smile. "About what?" "Emma challenged you to a debate." Barron just nodded. He knew it would happen sooner or later. "And you will accept?" "Of course," he answered calmly. It wasn't about pride or wanting to prove anything to anyone. He just knew that if he refused, it would look like he was scared. And he never refused a challenge. When his name was officially added to the list of participants, Emma made a post on the university group. "Well, my friends, get ready. Next Thursday we have an interesting evening. I'm going to ask Barron Trump some tough questions. Let's see what it's like when you can't hide behind a last name." The post collected hundreds of likes and comments. Some supported her, while others, on the contrary, said that this would be her worst mistake. But Barron wasn't reading the comments. He was preparing. He knew Emma's style. She loved provocation, often used sarcasm, and tried to play on emotions. But he also knew that her arguments were often based on slogans rather than facts. This was her main flaw. She tried more to create an effect than to convey the essence. So his strategy was simple, calm, and logic. On the day of the debate, the hall was filled to capacity. Students crowded around the entrance, discussing what to expect from the upcoming battle. In the front row sat the teachers, who also did not want to miss such an interesting confrontation. There were already 2 chairs and a high table on the stage, behind which the moderator usually sat. When the participants were announced, the hall exploded with applause. Emma walked onto the stage with confidence, her face set in determination. She knew this was her moment, her chance to put Trump in his place. Barron walked out calmly, without unnecessary emotions. He sat down on a chair, folded his hands on the table, and looked at the moderator, waiting for the beginning. Emma glanced at him quickly, but he didn't look away. "The debate has begun." The room froze in anticipation. The air was tense. Everyone understood that something special was about to happen. Debates at the university were always emotional, but today's duel was different from all the previous ones. For the first time, 2 completely different people would face each other on stage: Barron Trump, the heir to one of the most famous families in the world, and Emma Brooks, a bright representative of liberal student circles. The moderator took his place at the table, glanced at the sheet of questions, and raised his head. "Good evening, dear students and teachers. Today we have a special debate, as the opponents are people with diametrically opposed views. We have several prepared questions, but if the participants agree, they can also ask each other questions directly." Barron just nodded, confirming his agreement. Emma looked at him with a smirk, clearly already anticipating her victory. "Then let's begin. The first question concerns social inequality. Why is there such a huge gap between rich and poor in the modern world, and what can be done about it?" Emma was the first to speak. "It's very simple," she said, pausing briefly as if choosing her words to make her speech more convincing. "The rich don't want to share. They are happy with the current system because it makes them richer and the poor poorer. They avoid taxes, use cheap labor, and don't want to change the rules." She looked around the room for a reaction, and received nods of approval from several students. Then, turning to Barron, she added, "And your father, for example, fits perfectly into this image." The room shook, waiting to see how Barron would react to the direct attack. But he only bowed his head slightly and calmly answered, "You say that the rich don't want to share. But let's figure out who creates jobs, builds companies, invests in technology development. If you just give money to the poor today, they won't get richer, they'll just spend it. Real changes are possible when new jobs are created, when businesses develop, and not when someone takes from some and gives to others." Emma frowned. "So you think that the rich have the right to accumulate money without giving it back to society?" "No," Barron replied. "I think they have a responsibility to invest it in society. Not through artificial redistribution, but through creating opportunities." Some of the audience began to whisper again. Many had not expected Barron to answer so clearly and reasonably. The moderator took the floor. Good. The next question concerns government programs to support the population. What policies should be pursued to help those in need? Emma didn't miss the chance to attack again. There should be more support. The state is obliged to provide free education, accessible health care, and guaranteed jobs. Not everyone has rich parents who can pay for their education, like some do. The room buzzed. Apparently, this was another attack on Barron. But even here he did not fall for the provocation. Free education is a good idea, but it is not free. Taxpayers pay for it. Any social program requires funding, and the question is who will pay for it. If you raise taxes on business, then companies will start cutting jobs or going underground. As a result, the very people you want to protect will suffer. Emma tried to object, but Barron didn't let her get a word in. Instead of simply demanding more free services, it is better to focus on economic development. When more people are employed, when it is easier for businesses to develop, both the state treasury and the standard of living of citizens grow. This time, part of the audience even applauded. Emma realized that she was losing. She had been counting on an emotional reaction, but Barron remained calm, confident, and reasoned. But she had one more trump card. Okay, she said, pausing. Then let's talk about privilege. The hall froze again. You talk about fair competition, but what if a person was born into a rich family? He has everything, the best schools, the best universities, connections. How can you say that everything depends on effort if the starting conditions are so unequal? Now she looked straight at Barron, waiting to see how he would get out of this. But he wasn't going to get out of it. I don't deny that I was born into a privileged family, he admitted. But that doesn't change the fact that I also have to work to achieve something. People only see the name, but they don't see the efforts I make. Effort? Emma repeated sarcastically. Sorry, but you'll never know what it's like to fight for a place in the sun. Barron looked at her carefully. If you believe that wealth automatically makes a person successful, then why do so many children of rich parents become losers? Why are there those who lose everything despite the money? Emma opened her mouth, but didn't immediately find what to say. Because, in the end, it all depends on the person. Barron continued. You can be born into a poor family and become a leader. You can be born into a rich family and lose everything. Money is not a guarantee of success. The guarantee of success is discipline, knowledge, and the ability to work. The room froze. It was a powerful answer. The moderator looked at Emma. Any objections? Emma ran her tongue nervously over her lips. She realized that she had reached a dead end. No, she answered briefly. Barron looked at the audience and saw that even his detractors had to admit that he was worthy of respect. He had won this round. But there was still the main thing ahead, the final word. A tense silence fell over the audience. Emma Brooks, who had been confident of victory from the start, now felt the ground slipping from under her feet. She had been counting on the emotional effect, on the support of the audience, on Barron crumbling under the pressure, but things didn't go according to her plan. He didn't just answer, he cut through her arguments with the precision of a scalpel, leaving her without the possibility of a worthy retort. But she wasn't about to give up. She took a deep breath, looked at the audience, and spoke with renewed energy. Okay. Let's move away from theory and talk about reality. About personal experience. Barron, you say that success depends on work and knowledge. But tell me honestly, have you ever really needed something? Have you ever experienced fear that tomorrow there will be nothing to eat? Have you ever had to work to pay for housing or education? The hall froze. It was a personal blow. Emma stared at Barron, hoping he would falter, hesitate, finally show some weakness. She knew this was her last chance to regain control of the debate. But Barron was in no hurry to answer. He looked at her calmly, as if considering not the answer but the very formulation of the question. Then he leaned forward slowly, steepled his fingers, and spoke. No, he said calmly. I've never been hungry. I've never had to choose between tuition and housing. But that doesn't mean I don't know what work and responsibility are. He paused, not to collect his thoughts, but to let his audience feel his words. Every person faces their own trials. They are different for everyone. Some struggle with poverty, some with public opinion, some with the expectations placed on them. I was born into a family where everyone expects a lot from me. Where my every word or action immediately makes the headlines. Where I cannot afford to make mistakes, because they will not be forgotten or forgiven. The room listened with bated breath. Even those who had initially sided with Emma now looked at Barron differently. You say I don't know what it's like to work, he continued. But you've never had that kind of responsibility. You've never lived with the knowledge that every action you take will be discussed by millions of people. You've never felt the pressure of being treated not as a person, but as a symbol. Emma pressed her lips together but remained silent. I'm not complaining, Barron said. Everyone has their own journey. Everyone has their own struggles. I would never tell someone who grew up poor that I know how they felt. But you can't say you know how I felt either. He looked straight into Emma's eyes. It's not a competition of who had it harder. What matters is what we do with our lives. How we use what we've been given. And here we're all equal. The hall was silent. For the first time all evening, no one knew what to say. Emma looked away. She knew she had lost. But what irritated her most wasn't that she had lost the debate, but that she knew inside herself that he was right. The silence in the room was deafening. Even the air seemed to have grown thicker, as if the space between the debaters had been squeezed to its limit. Emma sat tensely, her fingers tightly gripping the pen on the table, but her gaze was directed somewhere to the side, avoiding meeting Barron's eyes. She realized that she had lost, but her pride did not allow her to admit it out loud. The moderator slowly looked from one participant to the other, as if giving them the opportunity to say the last word. Barron, he said finally, breaking the silence. What would you like to say in closing? Barron ran his hands across the table, as if wiping away invisible particles of dust, then raised his head and looked straight at the audience. I want to say that we all like to judge others, he began calmly. We think we know how other people live, what privileges they have, what trials they face. But the truth is that no one knows what's behind other people's doors. He spoke evenly, without arrogance, without a desire to prick or reproach. There was only calm and confidence in his voice. If you think that when a person comes from a rich family, everything comes easy to him, you are wrong. Money can give starting opportunities, but it does not make a person successful. It cannot make you study, work on yourself, set goals and achieve them. Barron paused briefly, looking around the audience as if assessing how attentively they were listening to him. If success depended only on one's origin, the world would be a completely different place. We would see millions of geniuses just because their parents were rich. But that doesn't happen. We see that in life, it's not those who had more money as children who win, but those who didn't give up. Those who worked. Someone in the hall applauded. Several students looked at each other, some nodded, some thought. We are all the architects of our own destiny, Barron finished. And no one will do it for us. The audience burst into applause. Even those who had been skeptical of him at the start could now admit that he was more than just the president's son. He was a person. Emma took a deep breath. She had lost, but in that moment she realized that this debate had become the most important lesson for her.